So, Miss Camille, I believe you can start from your side until I fix the problem. I do believe you're muted.
No.
I'm gonna
Is
work
it
on the
okay?
problem until it's fixed.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay. So hi everyone, my name is Camille Pardonneau. I'm a student in international relations and political science, and I'm representing here the NGO major group for Africa. So that being said, we can begin on the presentation, which will focus on the gap between Sustainable Development Goal 6 and the reality of water and sanitation crisis in Africa. So first, we would like to begin by reminding the Africa's commitment to SDG 6, as outlined in both the United Nations 2030 agenda, but also the African Union 2063 agenda. And as said in the resolution, the United Nations resolution, Sustainable Development Goal 6 call up nations to ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all, including universal access to safe drinking, an end to open defecation, improved water quality, sustainable water use efficiency, integrated water resources management, and the protection of water-related ecosystems, and strengthen the international cooperation. So I'm sorry, but on the slides, I put some extract of these two documents that I was talking about. Maybe later on, we could go back to it. And then on the following, we can take a closer look to the targets within the Sustainable Development Goal 6, because there is different targets in it. There's 8, and we can view different statistics for each of these targets that are based on the data of the background reports of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa in 2026. So we can begin, for example, by talking about the first target, target 6.1, which is called Safe and Affordable Drinking Water. About this one, we can say that Africa has made progress, but a bit too slowly, because the share of the population with safely managed drinking water increased only from 35% to 40% between 2015 and 2024. And 294 million people have gained access to at least basic services in 2015. This is progress. Regarding the second one, which is entitled An End to Open Defecation and Provide Access to Sanitation and Hygiene, we can say that the situation remains concerning because safely managed sanitation coverage does not exceed 30% across the continent in 2024. And at the same time, around 400 million still have no facilities to wash their hands, and 35 million more than in, this is 35 million more than in 2015. I'm sorry, we don't have the support still on the slides, but the statistics are also on the slides. And now we can take a closer look to the third one, sorry, which is improve water quality, wastewater treatment, and safe reuse. Water quality does improve, and the share of water bodies with good ambient quality rose from 71% to 79% in sub-Saharan Africa between 2017 and 2023. The fourth target that we're gonna see is called, and the purpose of this one is for increasing water use efficiency and ensure fresh water supplies. And regarding this one, we can say it can show that 64% of African countries remain below the global average of water use efficiency. Nevertheless, sub-Saharan Africa improved its overall efficiency by 7.4% since 2015. However, we can notice that the North African part is on very high water stress. So for the last targets, I put the statistic once again on the slides, but I'm not gonna explain all of them. Oh, I'm gonna share with
Miss
you
Camille,
now
I'm
my,
sorry to interrupt. I'm sure
yes,
now the problem is fixed. You can share your screen.
thank you. Um, can you see my slides now?
We can. Yes, we
Yeah.
can.
So
Yes.
I'm not gonna repeat everything, of course. I'm just showing you first documents, then the target I just spoke about, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I was saying that the last one, I'm just putting you here the statistics so that you can see on your own, but I'm gonna move on other things because sorry, yes, like a conclusion of the statistics. What we can say about this overall statistic is that although progress towards achievement of Sustainable Development Goal 6 has accelerated in parts in Africa, most indicators continue to reflect uneven performance, persistent service gaps, and increasing pressure on water resources. Across the continent, the data shows steady but highly uneven progress since 2015. But this is what we talked about is really average data. And Africa is a diverse continent. So of course, we're going to have disparities between region, between within the same countries, and in the same countries between urban and rural inequalities. So I'm going to give you some examples to illustrate this. For example, to illustrate the regional inequalities, we already talked a bit about this between the North Africa and the Sub-Saharan Africa. Regarding the third target. For example, in Sub-Saharan Africa, approximately 20 million cubic meters of household wastewater were generated in 2024. And from this, around 20% were safely treated. But in contrast, on the North Africa, a similar volume was produced. And from this volume, around 64.5% was safely treated. So it showed a clear regional gap in wastewater treatment capacity and infrastructures. This equality within the same region, are also visible on sanitation practices. For example, in 1924, around 200 million people in Africa still practiced open defecation, including 90 million in West Africa and 60 million in East Africa. While some countries within these two regions I just talked about have made strong progress. For example, in rural Cabo Verde, open defecation was reduced by 2/3, and in Eswatini, it was eliminated. And however, on the other countries are moving on the opposite direction, and in at least 4 sub-Saharan African countries, including Chad, Democratic Republic of Congo, Nigeria, the number of people practicing open defecation increased by at least 1 million. So it shows, besides this very average data, it shows very specific example. And we also have disparities within the same countries. We can talk about Senegal, for example, that in 2019, access to basic hygiene service varied dramatically, serving 58% of the population in Zingchor, but in Kédougou, just 1% of the population had access to that. In addition, we also had very disparities between rural and urban areas that remain very strong, and this is due to the fact that rural communities often depend on basic and provide services, while poor urban population face major affordability barriers. And this urban versus rural inequality also deeper the inequalities between gender. So thank you for listening to this. I'm going to move to another part where we can dig in, understanding a bit of why do we have such permanent issues regarding the Sustainable Development Goal 6. We're going to have several reasons that were already highlighted by the background report I talked about earlier. that is the source of the statistics. So here, one of the most critical challenges is the massive financing gap. And the African Development Bank estimates that achieving water security and sustainable sanitation in sub-Saharan Africa requires around 60 billion US dollars per year, while the current investment right now are a range between 10 or 19 billion. This means the continent is operating at fully 1/3 of the funding needed. We also have climate change that intensify this water-related risk and increases also the cost of the adaptation. And on the other hand, it also adds a water stress, and this water stress fuels conflict over shared resources, internal displacement, and migration. And regarding this, the conflict issues also impact very highly the problematic of water in Africa. We can talk about sub-Saharan Africa, where around 44% of global water-related conflicts were concentrated. And for example, in the Lake Chad basin, shared by Nigeria, Niger, and Cameroon, about 70% of water points have been sabotaged, for example. And then I'm finished regarding the big part of the presentation. I can move on the recommendation, if that's okay with you. So we proposed some recommendation regarding all of these issues. First will be to invite international financial institutions and development agencies, including the UN agencies and the Development Bank, to prioritize funding for public water operators and public partnerships. And on the same dynamic, the second one would call for strengthened technical cooperation between public water utilities to build institutional capacity without privatization dependency. These two recommendations comes from the fact that water infrastructure is increasingly financed through loans and private investments, which means projects are oriented toward profitability, toward urban or industrial areas, rather than toward universal access. In Kenya, for example, the Upper Tana Water Fund allows multinationals like Coca-Cola to secure their water supplies through private investments. And in Cape Town, subsidies are being recalibrated under the financial pressure at the expense of the most vulnerable residents. So this just comes from the fact that water is a public good and it cannot function according to the logic of profit. So this recommendation are from this concept. Then we have the other ones, which are encouraging the creation of structured spaces for reflection and dialogue between youth, public authorities, and water sectors stakeholders in order to collectively rethink water governance models, share local experience, and co-design innovative public policies that move beyond inherited managed framework. And on the same dynamic, also the second one, it's the call for creation in each country a government-led youth water program under the Ministry of Water and of Youth, if there is some, and encourage the establishment of digital platform because young people and youth use massive social media, so it could be a great way for allowing youth to submit local water management ideas, report issues, and monitoring public water services. This comes from the fact that Africa is indeed the youngest continent in the world, and that youth is not only a potential workforce, it is also an epistemic power, a capacity to think about the future beyond imposed framework, and to think about a universal that's really involve the African views by Africa, for Africa, and made by Africa. And so regarding this issue, youth can be a really great asset to rethink and try to make something that works. And that's all. Thank you for listening to me, everyone.